This woman refused to move her legs to let a person with mobility issues sit down. The subway car was packed, thick with the quiet exhaustion of commuters eager to get home. The air hummed with the rhythmic clatter of the train against the tracks, the occasional murmur of hushed conversations, and the distant wail of a busker's saxophone echoing from another car. People clung to metal poles, shifting subtly with each lurch of the train, eyes fixed on their phones or the floor anywhere but at each other. Amidst the sea of passengers sat Mary, a young woman draped in arrogance as if it were the latest fashion. She lounged across 3 seats, her long legs stretched out with an air of entitlement, blocking anyone else from sitting. She scrolled through her phone, seemingly oblivious or perhaps deliberately indifferent to the crowded space around her. At the next stop, an elderly passenger entered, leaning heavily on a cane. He scanned the packed car and, noticing the only available seats occupied by Mary's legs, approached her with a gentle yet firm request. "Excuse me, miss, could you please move your legs so I can sit?" he asked, his voice polite but weary. Mary barely glanced up, rolling her eyes with exaggerated annoyance. "Find another seat," she muttered, not bothering to shift an inch. The atmosphere in the subway car shifted. A quiet tension crackled in the air as passengers exchanged glances. A woman near the door whispered something to the man beside her. A young student with earbuds shook his head in disbelief, but no one spoke up. The bystander effect held them frozen in their places, unwilling to interfere. For a moment, it seemed like that would be the end of it, that injustice would be swallowed in the silence. But then, from the far end of the car, an older man with graying hair and sharp, observant eyes leaned toward his companion and murmured, "Time to teach this one a lesson." Without hesitation, the 2 men rose. They moved toward Mary with a sense of purpose, their presence cutting through the stale subway air like a knife. Before she could react, each man grabbed one of her legs firmly, but not violently, and lifted. "What the hell?" Mary shrieked, her phone slipping from her hand as she flailed. The entire subway car held its breath. Passengers watched in stunned silence as Mary, still kicking and shouting, was hoisted upright. The 2 men carried her not harshly, but with enough control to make it clear that resistance was futile. She screeched and hurled insults, but it was no use. The men maneuvered her toward the nearest pole and, with surprising grace, set her back down this time on her feet. Her long legs, once a symbol of defiance, now wobbled slightly as she found herself standing among the crowd, squeezed between indifferent passengers who made no effort to accommodate her. The once dense atmosphere cracked. Laughter rippled through the subway car, first a chuckle, then a wave of mirth rolling over the passengers like a tide. A young woman near the door wiped tears from her eyes. Even the student with earbuds smirked. Meanwhile, the elderly man with the cane now, with a free seat, lowered himself down with a sigh of relief. He looked up at the 2 men who had intervened and offered them a nod of gratitude. Mary, humiliated and fuming, glared at the laughing passengers. Her face burned with the weight of her own arrogance, now crumbling under the force of poetic justice. She turned her back, pressing herself into the wall, hoping to disappear. The subway rumbled on, but now the ride felt a little lighter. A lesson had been served, and for once in the chaotic dance of subway etiquette, the good guys had won. Mary stood there, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face burning with humiliation. The subway car was still buzzing with the aftershocks of laughter, but now the conversations had shifted. People exchanged knowing glances, whispered remarks, and a few even glanced at her with smug satisfaction. She scowled. Idiots, that's what they all were. It wasn't her fault that the subway was crowded. And it wasn't her fault she had long legs. Besides, who did those old men think they were, manhandling her like that? The train rattled onward, stopping and starting as the city blurred past the scratched windows. Every few minutes, a new wave of passengers stepped in, shifting the dynamics of the packed carriage, but something was different now. Mary could feel it. People weren't looking away anymore. Before, she had been invisible, just another passenger absorbed in their own world. But now, she could feel the weight of their eyes. It was in the quick glances, the smirks exchanged behind hands, the hushed murmurs. And then a voice clear, sharp, and cutting right through the noise. "You know," an older woman said, looking directly at Mary, "you could have just moved your legs in the first place." A few passengers chuckled. Mary clenched her jaw, but before she could shoot back a reply, the train jolted to a stop. 42nd Street, Grand Central. The doors slid open, and Mary saw her chance to escape. She bolted, pushing past a few people in her rush to get out. The moment her feet hit the platform, she exhaled sharply out, finally. She took a few hurried steps toward the exit, hoping to disappear into the night and put this entire disaster behind her. But fate, it seemed, wasn't quite finished with her yet. As she marched toward the escalators, still fuming, she barely noticed the janitor standing near the tiled wall with a mop and bucket. The caution, wet floor sign was there, but her pride was still stinging too much for her to be paying attention. And then, one moment she was storming forward. The next, she was airborne. Her legs flew out from under her as if the subway itself had conspired against her. For a split second, time slowed. She felt weightless, floating in a cruel, cinematic moment of irony before gravity made its final decision. She landed flat on her back, hard. A sharp gasp rippled through the platform. A few people turned to look. And then, just like on the subway, the laughter started again. It wasn't cruel exactly, it wasn't malicious. It was the kind of laughter that spills out when the universe decides to deliver a perfect, poetic moment. Even the janitor, who had rushed forward to help, had to stifle a chuckle. Mary groaned, blinking up at the fluorescent ceiling. For a long second, she just lay there, stunned, staring at the lights above her. A voice, low and amused, cut through the laughter. "Karma works fast, huh?" She turned her head and saw him. The same older man from the subway, the one who had helped lift her legs. He stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, watching her with the kind of smirk that only comes from years of wisdom and experience. He didn't offer his hand to help her up. He didn't need to. He just gave her a knowing nod before turning and walking away, blending into the crowd. Mary swallowed her pride and slowly sat up. Maybe, just maybe, she would think twice next time before hogging subway seats. Maybe, but for now, she just wanted to disappear. And as the laughter of strangers echoed in her ears, she realized something even more frustrating than her bruised ego. The universe had definitely just taught her a lesson. The morning after, a new perspective. Mary woke up the next morning with a dull ache in her back, an even sharper one in her pride. As she shifted under the covers, she winced, recalling the spectacle she had made of herself the night before. The subway humiliation was bad enough, but slipping on the platform in front of half of New York City? That was the kind of embarrassment that stuck. She groaned and grabbed her phone, hoping to distract herself. But the moment she unlocked the screen, her stomach dropped. Trending, Subway Princess. A video thumbnail caught her eye, a still frame of her, sprawled on the subway floor, mid-yell. Another clip showed the exact moment she went flying on the wet platform. Thousands of likes. Thousands of comments. No way. She clicked on the first video. When entitlement meets karma, live from the NYC subway. Watch till the end. The clip showed everything. Her stretched out legs blocking the seats, the older man's polite request, her dismissive refusal. Then came the moment of justice, the two men lifting her legs, the collective laughter of the passengers, her flustered outrage. And then, as if the internet gods had orchestrated it perfectly, the next video in the thread was her second downfall, the literal one. The subway incident had been bad, but slipping on that wet floor, that was the grand finale. The comments were relentless. "This is the best thing I've seen all week." Instant karma at its finest. Bro, she didn't just take an L, she took the whole alphabet. Subway Princess thought she was royalty. The universe said nah. She scrolled, her face burning. Not a single person had come to her defense. Even accounts that normally fought against public shaming were cracking jokes. It was like the entire city had banded together in cosmic agreement she had deserved this. Mary threw her phone onto the bed and covered her face with her hands. Great, just great, for the next few days. She avoided the subway entirely. She walked, she took cabs, she even tried one of those overpriced e-scooters. But eventually, she had to face reality. New York wasn't a city where you could run from public transit forever. So 3 days later, she found herself back on the platform, her hood up, sunglasses on, trying to blend in. The subway princess scandal had already started to die down online, but she wasn't about to take any chances. The train arrived, she stepped in. This time, she sat properly, her legs tucked neatly under her seat. Lesson learned. A few stops in, she noticed someone sitting across from her. An older man with graying hair, a familiar coat, and a knowing smirk. Her stomach flipped. It was him, the man who had lifted her legs. The man who had watched her fall on the platform. She swallowed hard and looked away, pretending to be deeply fascinated by an ad for personal injury lawyers. But the man wasn't ignoring her. Didn't recognize you without your throne, he said casually. Mary stiffened. She could have ignored him. She could have muttered an insult and gone back to her phone. But something in his tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was curious. And for the first time, instead of snapping back defensively, she sighed. Yeah, well, she muttered, turns out karma's got a great sense of humor. The man chuckled. That it does. A beat of silence, the train rattled on. Mary hesitated before glancing up at him again. Look, I was kind of a jerk that day. His eyebrows lifted slightly. And well, she cleared her throat, forcing the words out. I shouldn't have taken up those seats. The man studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. Good, that means you actually learned something. Mary rolled her eyes. Yeah, no need to rub it in. He smirked. I won't, just glad to see you sitting like a civilized human this time. Another pause, then, to her own surprise, Mary found herself chuckling. A real chuckle, not one coated in sarcasm or spite. The train slowed to a stop. The man stood, giving her one last nod before stepping toward the doors. Take care, kid, and just like that, he was gone. Mary exhaled, shaking her head. A week ago, she never would have imagined having this conversation. A week ago, she thought she was above everyone else, stretching out like she owned the place. But now she was just another passenger, one who finally understood the unwritten rules of the subway. As the train rumbled forward, she caught her reflection in the window. No longer the subway princess, just Mary. And for the first time in a while, that didn't seem so bad.